on this weekend.
Or
And-
Tuscany.
What's that?
Or Tuscany. His original
Oh, yeah.
email said
Yes, he was
going to Tuscany.
So let's go ahead and get started in prayer here, and we may conclude this letter today. Father, we do want to just pause and put our focus on looking at your word, on its application to our lives, on what it was that you left these passages for. And we desire to be men who truly glorify you in the manner that we live. I thank you for these guys and the encouragement that it is. And we praise your name. Amen. All right. Starting in verse 9, and probably read through the whole thing. David, you want to do that?
Yeah, I could do that. All the way through, huh?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's all about the same sort of thing here.
Okay, do your best to come to me quickly, or Demas, because he loved this world. He has deserted me, and he has gone to Thessalonica.
Thessalonica.
Crescens, has gone to Galatia, and Titus to Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, because he is helpful to me in the ministry. I sent Tychicus.
You drew the short straw today on reading, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
No, that's horrible. I'm so glad you didn't call on me.
To Ephesus. When you come to bring the cloak that I left with Carpus at Troas, and my scrolls, especially the parchments, Alexander, the metal worker, hey, there's a metal worker there, nice, did me a great deal of harm. The Lord will repay him with what he has done. You too should be on your guard against him, because he strongly opposed our message. At my first defense, no one came to my support, but everyone deserted me. May it not be held against them, but the Lord stood at my side and gave me strength, so that through me the message might be fully proclaimed and all the Gentiles might hear it. And I was delivered from the lion's mouth. The Lord will rescue me from every evil attack and will bring me safely to his heavenly kingdom. To him be glory forever and ever. Amen. Is that the end, or is that?
Now keep going.
All right. Final greetings. Greet Priscilla and Aquila and the household of the, oh man, Honest Forest,
Me
Honest
too.
Forest, Erastus stayed in Corinth, and I left Trophimus sick in Miletus. Do your best to get here before winter. Eubulus greets you, and so do Pudens, Linus, Claudia, and all the brothers. The Lord be with your spirit. Grace be with you. That's it. That was tough.
Man,
Nice
David,
I went to Belen High School. I thought I did pretty good.
what did you do to Tom that he picked you for this today?
Yeah, I'm the rookie here. I knew he'd pick me.
Jeez.
That was kind of cold.
Wow.
But it doesn't it make you glad your name's David and not Eubulus or something?
Wow, those are a lot of isses, huh?
All right.
I know I have a rash.
Okay, so, by way of reminder, this letter is to Timothy, and the first statement he makes there is, make every effort to come to me soon. So Paul is in prison, and from everything that he's indicated, he knows he's about to die, and he's trying to get some encouragement, some comfort from some of the people that have been with him and some who have not. But he wants Timothy to come, and because Demas, what do we know about Demas? Anything?
He's mentioned one other time in one of the Gospels. I think along with Timothy, isn't he?
I don't know.
And
Uh,
I think Colossians, he's one of the people in the list of greetings at the end.
Okay.
So
So
he's like a
apparently,
bad guy or what?
well, I don't know if he's a bad guy. It certainly speaks negatively of him as far as having loved the world. But if he was in a final greeting in, what was it, Colossians, Mike?
Yeah, let me see if I can. Colossians 4:14.
It says,
Let me find it here.
while we're on a pause here, anybody heard from Jeff? He's missed about the last 2 or 3 Friday mornings. Something changed in his work, or has anybody talked to him?
I talked to him Tuesday night. He's been very involved in getting his dad into a
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
home.
Okay. All right. What do you got, Mike?
Okay, Colossians 4:14. Luke, the beloved physician, sends you his greetings, and also Demas.
Okay. So obviously he was a very trusted person. But for some reason he deserted Paul. And Paul doesn't hesitate to take Alexander the coppersmith to task. And yet, all he says about Demas is that he wanted to go back to the world, it sounds like. Crescens has gone to Galatia and Titus to Dalmatia. Now, Titus, I don't believe was on the outs at all with Paul. I think that's just where he went. In fact, where did Titus minister at?
Oh, my. Thessalonica with Timothy and Paul.
And then he left him in Crete
Crete.
to start a ministry. So everybody who's mentioned there, I don't think are bad guys. I think Titus, the next book in line here is the one to Titus, and I think it says something about him leaving him in Crete. For this reason I left you in Crete, that you might set in order what remains. So he was going to build the ministry at Crete. So he's not a bad guy. Crescens, no idea.
It almost sounds like I'm kind of baffled about and the whatever and is grammatically, because it kind of links them with Demas, but I know the same thing about Titus, but it almost sounds like Paul has sent them out rather than leaving, because he doesn't say anything about them deserting him. It's just they have gone to these, and Galatia, Paul witnessed to several times, and yeah, Titus was real strong in there. So Yeah.
I think what's interesting, in fact, that passage that Mike read in Colossians also includes Luke. Luke was a really faithful guy to Paul.
Hmm.
You know, you think of his status, he was obviously very intelligent, and he did a lot of writing. He kept a lot of history. You've got Acts and Luke both. So Luke was a stand-up guy, it seems like, and a medical doctor, if I recall correctly. So and you've got Luke, who's really a big support. So only Luke is with me, and then pick up Mark and bring him with you, for he is useful to me for service. So he is charging Timothy with going by wherever Mark is and grabbing him up. And Mark is the one, as I recall, that Paul and Barnabas split company over because Barnabas wanted to bring him along on a missionary journey, and Paul wanted nothing to do with Mark. But obviously, that's a healed situation. He is useful to me for service. So Mark obviously redeemed himself in Paul's eyes. What was the split over? Does anybody recall why Paul got crossways with Mark? I don't know that it even says.
I think it just says that he left him earlier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
didn't want to go on any further or something like that. Yeah,
But he didn't say
but
it was good or bad.
he obviously redeemed himself.
Tom, how did they get these letters to each other?
I think they were hand delivered. In fact,
You had them hand delivered, like UPS or something?
no, I think it was like one of the guys, Paul would give it to him and say, "Here, take this to Galatia," or
On a
that
horseback.
type of thing. In fact, on one or two of them, I think it says so and so is bringing this to you, or is that? But I wouldn't think there were any carrier pigeons or mail service or anything like that. But
Pony Express.
yeah, maybe that was First Pony Express. Yeah. But when you think about how far away, you bring up kind of a good point. What if you're the guy that doesn't have to read the letter like you had to, but you had to deliver it, and it's so dang far away that that would
It's a
be
journey.
a real. Yeah, I'm not sure I want to be the messenger guy.
Well, Paul could have been dead by the time this all got out and everybody got back to him.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point that you bring up, because it's not like you just had a Zoom meeting with them.
Yeah, Al Gore hadn't been born yet.
That's right. So we couldn't have had the internet.
No.
I just wonder why he actually expects them to get there. And he's going to have a party at the prison, or
that's a good point, because at this point he was in prison, I believe. I don't think he was under house arrest. So, for him to send for people and send for his books and his coat, and, you bring up a good point. What was prison like? That you could just have a party, or what? Yeah, I'm not sure how that worked, Carl.
Maybe they had visiting rights, or
Any idea historically on that, Mike?
No.
it almost sounds like he was exiled and placed, maybe not like prison with the chains on the wall that maybe we think of. I don't know.
Yeah, he does seem to have some kind of access to the outside world, obviously. Send these people to me because they're useful. I don't know how much use you could have in prison for somebody.
And he can get letters out.
Yeah. And, when you think of all these people that he's talking about here, Demas and Crescens and Titus and Luke and Mark and Tychicus, I sent him to Ephesus. He does seem to have a circle of friends there in prison. And maybe they were, it seems like historically I remember seeing or reading something about prisoners had to basically kind of take care of themselves. If they really wanted to eat real food, they had to have somebody on the outside bring food to them because the state didn't keep them up as they do today. So you almost needed people ministering to you in prison, or you wouldn't eat, you wouldn't have a cloak. But I don't know if that's the case here or not.
Maybe he was calling them there because he was in prison and he needed somebody that was free to do some work for them.
Very, very possible.
I mean?
Yeah, who's the guy that's going to take this letter to someplace else? But in verse 12, Tychicus, I've sent him to Ephesus. So these are men that he has dispatched, probably for the ministry, to spread the gospel. And then in 13, he says, when you come, bring the cloak, which I left at Troas, with Carpus, and the books, especially the parchments. So Paul obviously didn't possess much, but apparently he left most of it in Troas before he was in prison. And I don't think we have any other mention of Carpus. But so Timothy was basically stationed where, in Ephesus? Does that sound right?
Yes.
And if that's the case, then he's got to go from Ephesus to Troas to pick up the stuff he left with Carpus. He's got to anyway, Timothy is charged with doing a bunch of stuff to get to Paul in prison. So he's tasked him with some pretty serious stuff. It kind of makes you realize just how dedicated these men were to spreading the gospel in the first century. Because, I mean, here's a whole handful of guys that have given up everything to be with Paul to spread the gospel. I mean, that was Paul's life. And these were obviously very dedicated men that you hear very little of. Paul was the hero, and these guys were all kind of unsung people. And yet 2,000 years later, here we are talking about them. Pretty dedicated people.
You gotta wonder too if these letters were given sneakily to somebody to get out, because he was in prison for a reason, and obviously they didn't want the gospel to go forward. So why would they just say, "Oh yeah, go ahead and send the letter. Give me the letter. I'll go ahead and send it for you," like the guards or whatever. It almost seems like maybe he had an inside or an outside, person that would do that for him. I don't know. I'm just trying to get
Actually, yeah, in the
about it.
context of, I mean, Paul's in prison for preaching the gospel.
Mhm.
Yet
Yeah.
he's sending these people, he's dispatching them to different areas of the continent there, and and getting letters out. So obviously there was some kind of, in fact, almost an underground railroad type concept that that is probably being utilized here. That's a good point, David. So verse 14, Alexander the coppersmith did me much harm. The Lord will repay him according to his deeds. In fact, be on guard against him yourself, for he vigorously opposed our teaching. So Alexander the coppersmith. I've got a holy note here that says it's probably not the same as the Alexander mentioned in 1 Timothy 1:20. In fact, my holy notes say that we may infer from verse 15 that he may have caused the arrest of Paul in some city, and he was hostile to Paul's teaching. So I don't think we know anything else about him particularly. Acts 19:33. Mike, turn to that, Acts 19:33. I've got some reference to Alexander there.
Let's see, and some of the crowd concluded that it was Alexander, since the Jews had put him forward, and having motioned with his hand, Alexander was intending to make a defense to the assembly. Now, what's the context here? So he's probably in Ephesus.
So is he making a defense for Paul, or what is he doing then?
Okay, we got to read back here. So there was the coppersmith rebellion because they were afraid of losing their business.
Okay. Actually, that does make sense.
Makes sense.
So Alexander sounds like he was probably leading some type of thing to get Paul's message squashed because they were losing the idol business.
I did read a commentary about him that said he may have been making idols, and that must be the reference that they were using to form that opinion.
Yeah, that does make sense. So Alexander the coppersmith did me much harm. The Lord will repay him according to his deeds. So does God? I don't remember what comedian used to do it, but they used to use the phrase, God's going to get you for that. Is that what he's referring to here? The Lord will repay him according to his deeds. General loss of salvation, or not that he ever had salvation, but is it a general thing, or is God going to get him specifically for this attack on Paul?
Sounds like he's going to let the Lord judge him, not, don't judge him. The Lord will judge him for his works.
Okay.
It sounds like a warning because he went against their message. The message that they were going to put out.
Yeah, and definitely verse 15, be on guard against him yourself, because he didn't like our message. And that that little passage in Acts there does sound like it was reprisal for messing with his business of making idols. Verse 16, at my first defense, no one supported me, but all deserted me. May it not be counted against them. My holy notes say the preliminary hearing with which Paul's final trial opened, though some take this to mean Paul's first trial in Rome 3 years before. Either way, it was secondary to what's got him in prison now. But Paul found himself alone, even all of these. In fact, it sounds like totally alone. Everyone deserted me. So even Luke, the faithful physician, sounds like he backed off even at my first defense.
I wonder how quickly that would have come about after he was taken into custody. I wonder if they didn't have a chance to get to him because he would have
I
been
don't have
taken
any idea what
to Rome.
the time frame would be on something like this.
But he's saying not to hold it against them. I don't know, maybe they were just scared because they saw that he was going to be thrown in prison and they didn't want to go to prison and get killed.
And maybe it was a very vigorous assault on Paul, as far as you and everybody that is with you is going to get it, and people bailed. But verse 17 is the encouragement that Paul had. When you think about it, from verse 9 through 16, it's fairly depressing. I mean, here's Paul and I have to think that he really committed his life to the spread of the gospel, that it was very genuine, that it was almost a 24/7 type operation for him. In fact, that verse 7, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the course, I have kept the faith. He's really vigorous in his defense of the gospel. And then he does 7 verses here that are pretty depressing for somebody who's given his life over to the gospel. And it's almost like he pulls himself out of this thinking about everybody who messed him over. And he said, but the Lord stood with me, strengthened me, in order that through me the proclamation might be fully accomplished, and that all the Gentiles might hear, and I was delivered out of the lion's mouth. So he does have a that's that silver lining, I guess. But it is testament to the Lord not leaving us on our own. When he said, I will never leave you, he meant it. And I think that's what Paul is trying to get across here is, doesn't matter how bad it is, Christ is going to be with you.
Nor forsake you.
Then the Lord will deliver me from every evil deed and will bring me safely to his heavenly kingdom. To him be the glory forever and ever. Amen. Well, obviously, Paul was beheaded, so that seems like an evil deed. you know, the hope, I think, is in the second statement, will bring me safely to his heavenly kingdom.
Yeah.
And the idea of the Lord delivering from that every evil deed certainly didn't seem to come through. Is his thought that that evil deed will not prevent me from getting into heaven? He'll deliver me from it having any eternal consequence on me? Or did he think that at this writing, did he think that the Lord would deliver him from prison, from being beheaded, from his captors? Any thoughts on that?
I wouldn't think that he was thinking it'd be even a physical deliverance, more of there was no doubt where he was going, because there was a crown laid up for him. And not that he would escape the execution that he knew was coming, because he already said, I'm being poured out like a drink offering and my time is near. And I think that's the thought behind asking Mark, or not Mark, but writing the letter to Timothy, make every effort to come to me soon, because his days were short. He knew he was going to die. So I don't take it that the delivering from the evil was, he's going to keep me from this, but he's going to get me safely to where he promised he's going to take me.
Yeah, I think that would be the right take on that.
Yeah, I find it interesting that before that he said the Lord stood by him. I think the Lord was with him through this whole thing. And it, you know, I mean, if you know you're going to get your head chopped off, but God is right there standing with you through the whole thing. I think if you had to have somebody there, it'd be the Lord to help you get through that piece of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think I think his relationship with Jesus Christ was so personal and was so vivid that it was like the Lord was standing right there.
Yeah.
And I think every one of us has the option to have that close of a relationship with Jesus Christ, if we're that committed as Paul was. The Lord stood with me. And this isn't a really deep passage, not a great deal of theology here. His concluding greetings with all these weird named people. But it does show those who were faithful and those who were not. It goes on to say, greet Prisca and Aquila and the household of Onesiphorus. I think throughout the book of Acts, we see Priscilla and Aquila being very devoted. In fact, he mentions him in several writings, Acts, Romans, 1 Corinthians, I believe. So they were obviously very devoted. So did Paul, I think we see some of it in Acts, but did Paul have a whole assembly of people that traveled with him from city to city? Or did he leave people in certain places and just try to revisit them as he was going around to keep them encouraged? Because these were brave people that were committed to the gospel, just like Paul was. Priscilla and Aquila, Luke, a lot of folks that Paul obviously traveled with. I don't know. I try to envision myself in that position and wonder if I have anybody that would hang with me through thick and thin like Paul did. But then they probably saw his commitment, and people probably wouldn't see that commitment in me. So anyway, these are people that were very devoted, not only to Paul but to the gospel message.
You know, in Thessalonians, it talks about Paul sending Timothy back to them to check up on them because they were driven out of Thessalonica, and or Paul was anyway, and then he wanted to get word from Thessalonica on how they were doing, since he had only been with them for about 3 weeks, I think, and so he sent Timothy back, and then Timothy brought word back to Paul about what was going on in Thessalonica. And it seems like some people may have gone on with him, and like he opened First Timothy, he left him in Ephesus to oversee the church there. So seems like both. He left people where he'd been, and he also, some people went with him. And it also seems like from his outreach and his journeys, he made many strong kinship. And when he returned to places, they took him in, like Priscilla and Aquila.
It's almost like he planted the churches, then he left them, and then he kind of guided through them, but then he'd go on and plant another church. And then whenever he needed to, he'd revisit, just like you said, Greg, and then they would take care of him at the time. Just like the churches do now.
I just turned to the missionary journeys map in the back of my Bible. And when you think about the distance that people had to travel just to get from one city to another, and it was all on foot or by ship, how many years are we talking about from Paul's first call or from his first public ministry to the end of his life?
This is like 30 years.
So
I think
30
it's around-
years
I think it's around 30 years, yeah.
of traipsing through these lands. We were talking about how hard it was to get things, it's not like they had airmail or anything for these letters. Think about how hard it was, the hardship of going from place to place. If you look at where Troas is, where Timothy's supposed to go and get his cloak and the stuff he left behind there, and you look at how far that is to Rome or to Ephesus or anywhere else that he's talking about, man, those are long journeys.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how committed do you have to be?
It
Yeah.
seems like those journeys would take in some money, especially if you're going by ship.
Yeah. Actually, that brings up a point. What was Timothy dependent upon the tithes and offerings of various churches to do that, to make these kind of trips? I don't know, that putting all of that together just seems like a huge task, even to do what Paul's asking him to do right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have to keep in mind that there was a great deal of commerce in those days, and there were ships going back and forth all the time. There was also
So
overland.
Right.
Yeah. So let's finish up with these few people that he's talking about here. Greet Priscilla and Aquila, household of Onesiphorus. Erastus remained at Corinth, but Trophimus I left sick at Miletus. I don't think there's any mention of him in Acts. Make every effort to come before winter. So there was no expectation of him being there next week. Eubulus greets you. Also Pudens and Linus and Claudia and all the brethren. So he does have access to these people, even though he's in prison. They all greet you. The Lord be with your spirit. Grace be with you. And I think Carl had a good point when he said, gosh, Paul could be dead by the time Timothy even read this letter.
Yeah.
You start thinking about the wherewithal that it would take for him to do what he is charged to do here. It would take some time. But that finishes up this letter. And I think what are the main points that this letter brings out? Anything that struck you as, I think it's all significant. I don't mean that, but what hit you about this letter, 2 Timothy? I think the thing that got to me throughout the whole thing was thinking about this being Paul's final surge to encourage this young minister. This is the most important stuff that I can tell you. Keep this stuff in regard, the whole idea of in the last days, difficult times, be diligent to present yourself approved of the gospel. These kind of encouragements, what would you be telling some young man that was following in your footsteps when you knew you were about to die? What's the most important stuff you could tell him? And that's what kept going through my mind was Paul really wanted to make sure Timothy had everything he needed to accomplish the task of the gospel.
No
Yeah,
doubt.
I have a side note here, Tom. It just kind of describes it or wraps it up. It says, Paul feels disconnected from the churches and hurt by the fact that many had defected from loyalty to him and the apostolic. And now in prison with all his loyal friends gone, except Luke, he awaits death. Yet the battle-scarred apostle of the cross shows no regrets as he lays down his life for his Lord.
Yeah, pretty touching, without a doubt.
Very confident in God's promises.
Yeah, he shows no sign of gosh, I hope this was the right thing that I did. He is very confident. Anything else that we want to bring out before we put this one to bed? And where do we want to go next?
Well, since Alex isn't here, why don't we volunteer him to start teaching in Revelation,
Oh, that would be neat.
at least through the churches, not the whole book, and I'm kind of halfway serious because the ladies are currently doing the first 3 chapters in Revelation, and it would be a neat parallel, I think, to be able to discuss some of the passages that they're going over, and it would lead to some really neat conversations with their spouses.
Okay, I'm certainly game for that.
So has
Anybody?
anybody here really studied the first 3 chapters in Revelation?
I have not. I have not studied. That is one book that I have not studied.
Me
I've
too.
read through it, but I've never studied it.
So since Jim's on mute, we could volunteer him.
So last we're seeing of Jim,
Hmm.
actually Alex may enjoy picking that up.
You just might.
Why don't you, when he gets back, run that by him?
I will. I really do think it'd be. Liz and I have been doing daily studies in Revelation for about a month and a half, and it's really, I don't know, it's been encouraging to me. We've really enjoyed it because it brings out all kinds of questions and discussion between she and me, and Liz has enjoyed it. Of course, she's been trying to read and all of that to prepare for their Thursday night, and Ginger apparently studied, I don't know, 5 years or so, and she just said, all I feel comfortable doing are the first 3 chapters. So I think it'd be really neat, but if somebody else has strong inclination,
I certainly do not, and I am not opposed to doing that at all. I think I actually use several passages in the first 3 chapters of Revelation when we're doing biblical counseling, because the secondary applications of many of those churches are very applicable to every one of us. And
Sure.
I think that it would be interesting to see the the tack that Alex took on how important the secondary applications are of those passages. I think that might be interesting. So I'm all for it if you get him to bone up on it. Anything else, gentlemen? We'll cut loose a little bit early today.
was when I signed in today, you were talking to Kurt about a tax document or something. Is that something that we need to know about, or?
No, we're just trying to get a non-tax certificate that we haven't used in so long, probably since what, Kurt? When we were doing the remodel on the church was probably the last time we used one of those to buy material. So
I dealt with it was with setting it up with Home Depot, and when we were doing some major purchases, but I think that was back when we were doing all the remodeling. So I mean, we probably haven't really used it in 20 years.
Right, and I think that's true. So, but we needed to to find a copy of one, and I'm just too ignorant to do the trudging through those all the verbiage and everything of those websites for the state on taxes. I'm just not there.
You know, Tom, just they had an FAQ, and one of them was basically, what about if I can't find the links? And so maybe, and you click on it and it basically said, well, if you're having trouble finding the links, your registration might not be complete.
Oh, okay. So,
And then it said call and gave a number. So I think we might be up to that. And the reason why we might not be able to find anything is that, when they went electronic from probably 20 years ago, something didn't get transferred, or maybe they required a re-registration and we just missed it.
okay. Well, hopefully you can work your way through that and we can get what we need. Anything else, gentlemen? You guys have a great day. We will see you hopefully Sunday. I think everybody, except you, Carl. Have a great one, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.